What your soulmate did today will completely take you by surprise. Not because it was something loud or extraordinary that the world could witness, but because it was something deeply silent, almost invisible, yet filled with a kind of love that only exists when two souls are connected beyond circumstances. Today, your soulmate chose you in a way that required strength, restraint, and a quiet kind of courage that most people will never understand. They woke up this morning with your presence still lingering in their thoughts, not as a sharp pain anymore, but as something softer, something that has slowly become a part of who they are. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to imagine a life where things were different, where timing was kinder, where choices were simpler, where love didn't come with boundaries and responsibilities. But then reality gently settled back in, and instead of fighting it, they accepted it again, the same way they have been doing every single day. What would surprise you is that today, they didn't try to run away from what they feel for you, and they didn't try to erase you either. Instead, they honored it silently. They carried you with them through their day, not as a burden, but as something sacred. While talking to others, while fulfilling responsibilities, while living the life they have committed to, there were moments where their mind drifted back to you, and instead of pushing those thoughts away, they let them stay for a while. Not to hold on to you in a way that would disrupt your life or theirs, but to remind themselves that what they felt, and still feel, is real. Today, your soulmate chose integrity over desire once again, and that choice was not easy. There were moments when they wanted to reach out, to hear your voice, to break the distance even if just for a second, but they didn't. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They understand that love is not always about being together, and sometimes the purest form of it is protecting each other's lives from becoming complicated, messy, or broken. They chose to respect the life they have built and the life you deserve, even if it means carrying a part of their heart that will never fully belong anywhere else. What would surprise you even more is that today, they smiled because of you. Not in a way that others would notice, but in those quiet, private moments where a memory of you crossed their mind unexpectedly. It could have been something small, a song, a place, a phrase, or even a random thought, but it was enough to bring a softness to their expression. And instead of feeling sadness, they felt gratitude. Gratitude that in a lifetime, they got to feel something so rare, something so deep, even if it wasn't meant to stay in the way they once hoped. Today, your soulmate didn't try to forget you. They didn't try to replace you. They didn't try to label what you were to them as a mistake or a phase. Instead, they accepted that some connections are not meant to be lived out fully, but that doesn't make them any less real or meaningful. They carried that understanding with maturity, with patience, and with a quiet kind of love that doesn't demand recognition. And here is the part that would truly take you by surprise. Today, they wished you happiness, genuinely, without any hidden longing attached to it. They thought about your life, your future, and the path you are walking, and instead of feeling the ache of not being a part of it, they hoped that you are at peace, that you are smiling, that you are finding the kind of love and stability that life should give you. That kind of selfless wish doesn't come easily. It comes after nights of confusion, after days of emotional battles, after slowly learning how to love someone without holding on to them. Today, your soulmate proved to themselves that their love for you has grown beyond attachment. It has become something quieter, something wiser, something that doesn't need presence to exist. They didn't speak your name out loud, but it echoed in the way they carried themselves, in the way they chose patience over impulse, and in the way they protected something that no one else can see. If you could see them today, you wouldn't notice anything different on the outside. They lived their day like anyone else. They fulfilled their responsibilities, they spoke normally, they smiled when required, they went through their routine. But inside, there was a whole world where you still exist, not as someone they are chasing, but as someone they have accepted as a permanent part of their emotional landscape. And the most surprising part is that they are no longer fighting that reality. They have made peace with it. They understand now that love doesn't always mean possession, and connection doesn't always mean union. Sometimes, it simply means knowing that somewhere in this world, there is a person who changed you in a way no one else ever could. Today, your soulmate didn't break down, didn't lose control, didn't let emotions overpower their decisions. Instead, they stayed grounded. They stayed true to their values. They stayed loyal to the life they have chosen, even while carrying a love that belongs to a different story. And that is what makes it so surprising, because the strongest kind of love is not the one that demands to be lived out loudly, but the one that quietly chooses what is right, even when it hurts. So while you went through your day unaware, thinking nothing unusual had happened, somewhere in the same world, your soulmate chose you in the most unexpected way, not by coming closer, but by staying where they are, by loving you without crossing the lines that life has drawn, and by holding on to you in a way that doesn't disturb your peace. And that kind of love, the kind that exists without needing to be seen, is the rarest kind of all, and if you think that was all, you would still be missing the depth of what truly happened inside them today, because love like this does not just exist in a single decision, it unfolds in layers, quietly, repeatedly, in ways that even they sometimes struggle to understand. As the day moved forward, there were moments where life demanded their full attention, responsibilities that required focus, conversations that needed presence, and yet even in the middle of all of that, you existed, not as a distraction, but as something woven into their emotional rhythm. It is strange how someone can be absent from your life and still feel so present in your being, and today, your soulmate felt that more than ever. There was a moment, small and almost insignificant to an outsider, where something reminded them of you so strongly that time felt like it paused for just a second. Maybe it was the way someone laughed, or a line from a movie, or the way the evening light fell across a familiar place, but whatever it was, it carried your essence with it. And in that moment, they didn't look away. They didn't shut it down. They let themselves feel it completely, not with desperation, but with a quiet acceptance that this is what loving you has become, something that lives within them, not something they need to reach for anymore. What would surprise you is that today, they almost spoke your name. Not out loud, not in a way that anyone else could hear, but internally, like a whisper their own heart understands. It came and went quickly, but it carried a depth of emotion that words could never fully capture. And instead of turning that moment into something painful, they held it gently, like you hold something fragile that you don't want to break. That is how they handle your memory now, with care, with respect, with an understanding that not everything beautiful is meant to be held tightly. There was also a moment of weakness today, a moment where they questioned everything. Where they wondered what would happen if they chose differently, if they allowed themselves to follow what they feel instead of what they know is right. For a brief second, the idea of reaching out to you didn't feel impossible. It felt close, almost within reach. But then something stronger rose within them, not fear, not hesitation, but clarity. They remembered why distance exists, why boundaries were necessary, why some stories, no matter how beautiful, cannot be rewritten without causing damage to lives that are already in motion. And so, they stepped back again, not because their feelings faded, but because their understanding deepened. That is the part most people would never see, the constant balance they maintain between what they feel and what they choose. Today, your soulmate also did something you would never expect. They forgave themselves a little more. For a long time, a part of them carried guilt for loving you, for feeling something so strong in a situation where it couldn't fully exist. But today, they allowed themselves to see it differently. They realized that love, in its purest form, is not something to be ashamed of. It is not a mistake. It is not something that needs to be erased. It is simply something that happened, something that changed them, something that taught them the depth of their own heart. And instead of fighting that truth, they embraced it quietly. That shift, that small internal acceptance, is something that changes everything, even if no one else can see it. As the evening approached, there was a calmness in them that hadn't always been there before. Not because they stopped loving you, but because they stopped resisting the reality of it. They understand now that some connections are not meant to be solved, not meant to be fixed, not meant to be turned into something practical or explainable. Some connections simply exist, and their purpose is not to stay, but to transform you. And you did that for them. In ways you may never fully realize, you changed how they see love, how they understand emotional depth, how they value honesty and integrity. Today, they carried that awareness with a kind of quiet pride, not in the situation, but in how they have handled it. Because choosing what is right over what is easy is never a small thing. There was also a moment today where they thought about your happiness again, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just a distant wish, it was something they truly believed in. They imagined you living your life, growing, smiling, building something meaningful, and instead of feeling like they were losing something, they felt like they were witnessing something from afar. That kind of perspective does not come overnight. It comes after learning how to separate love from possession, after understanding that caring for someone does not always mean being a part of their everyday life. And today, your soulmate reached that understanding a little more deeply than before. As the night slowly settled in, when everything became quieter and the distractions of the day faded away, that is when the truth of their emotions became the most clear. Because in silence, there is nothing to hide behind. No responsibilities, no conversations, no movement, just thoughts and feelings in their rawest form. And in that silence, you were still there. Not overwhelming, not painful, just present. Like a steady light that doesn't flicker, doesn't demand attention, but never fully disappears either. They sat with that feeling tonight, not trying to change it, not trying to run from it, just allowing it to exist. And that is something they couldn't do before. Before, it was either too intense or too confusing. But now, it has become something they can carry without losing themselves. That is growth, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. And here is something that would truly surprise you. Today, your soulmate didn't wish for things to be different. Not because they wouldn't have wanted a different story with you, but because they have started to accept that this story, the one that exists as it is, has its own kind of meaning. It may not be the kind of story people celebrate, it may not have the kind of ending that feels complete, but it is real, and sometimes, that is enough. They have stopped asking why as much as they used to. They have stopped trying to make sense of something that was never meant to fit into logic. Instead, they have started to see it as a part of their life that they will carry forward, not as a wound, but as a reminder. A reminder that they are capable of deep, selfless love. A reminder that they can choose integrity even when emotions are strong. A reminder that not all connections are meant to stay, but that doesn't make them any less significant. And as they prepare to sleep tonight, there is a quiet sense of peace within them. Not perfect peace, not the kind that erases all questions or emotions, but a steady, grounded kind of peace that comes from acceptance. They are no longer at war with their feelings. They are no longer trying to change what they feel for you. They have simply learned how to live with it in a way that doesn't break them or anyone else. And that, more than anything else, is what would truly take you by surprise. Because if you could see inside their heart today, you would not find chaos, you would not find regret, you would find a quiet, steady love that exists without needing anything in return. A love that has chosen dignity over desire, peace over possession, and truth over temporary happiness. And even though you may never witness it directly, even though it may never be spoken out loud, today your soulmate loved you in the purest way possible, by letting you go, by choosing what is right, and by still holding a space for you in their heart that no one else will ever fully understand. And even after all of this, even after a day filled with quiet choices and invisible strength, there is still more that unfolded within them that you would never expect, because love like this does not end when the day does. It lingers, it deepens, it reshapes itself in the stillness of the night and the honesty of solitude. As they lay down, with the world finally silent around them, there were no distractions left, no responsibilities to focus on, no conversations to hide behind, just their thoughts, their memories, and the truth they carry about you. And in that space, something very real happened today. They didn't miss you in the way that hurts uncontrollably anymore. They missed you in a way that felt calm. And that is what would surprise you the most, because once upon a time, even the thought of you would have been overwhelming, something that pulled them into a storm of emotions they couldn't control. But today, it felt different. Today, missing you felt like remembering something beautiful that belongs to them, even if they can't reach out and touch it anymore. They allowed themselves to revisit a memory tonight, not to get lost in it, but to simply sit with it for a moment. It wasn't dramatic or intense, just a small, meaningful memory, one of those moments that didn't seem like much at the time, but now hold so much emotional weight. And instead of questioning why it couldn't last, instead of wishing they could go back, they simply smiled to themselves. A quiet, almost invisible smile, but one that carried acceptance, gratitude, and a kind of emotional maturity that takes time to build. That is something they couldn't do before. Before, every memory was tied to a sense of loss, to unanswered questions, to a longing that felt endless. But today, it was just a memory, something that exists, something that mattered, something that will always be a part of them. There was also a moment tonight where they realized how much they have changed because of you. Not in a way that makes them feel broken, but in a way that makes them feel deeper, more aware, more connected to their own emotions. You taught them something without even trying: how to feel fully, how to care without conditions, how to hold on to something without needing to control it. And even though the situation was never simple, even though it came with its own set of challenges, they would not erase it if they could. That realization alone is powerful, because it means they no longer see this connection as something unfortunate or complicated, but as something meaningful that had a purpose in their life. And today, they accepted that purpose a little more. What would surprise you even further is that tonight, they didn't feel the urge to check on you, to find out what you're doing, or to search for some small connection to your current life. That urge, which once felt so strong, has softened. Not because they don't care, but because they trust that whatever is happening in your life is unfolding the way it should. That kind of trust does not come easily, especially when feelings run deep. But they have learned that love does not need constant reassurance to be real. It does not need updates or interactions to continue existing. It simply is. And tonight, they allowed it to just be, without interference, without curiosity pulling them in directions that would only make things harder. There was also a quiet moment of reflection where they thought about the version of themselves who first met you, and the version of themselves who exists now. And the difference between those two versions is something that even they find surprising. Back then, everything felt new, intense, full of possibilities and questions. Now, everything feels more grounded, more understood, more accepted. It's not that the feelings have disappeared, it's that they have evolved into something that no longer controls them. That is growth, even if it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It is the kind of growth that happens internally, slowly, over time, through choices that no one else sees. And tonight, they recognized that within themselves. As they closed their eyes, there was one final thought that passed through their mind, something they didn't hold on to, but something that came naturally, without effort. They hoped that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you are okay. Not in a dramatic, emotional way, but in a calm, sincere way that comes from a place of genuine care. That thought didn't come with sadness, didn't come with longing, didn't come with a desire to change anything. It came with peace. And that is what makes it so unexpected, because love is often associated with intensity, with desire, with wanting more. But what they felt tonight was something different. It was love without urgency, without expectation, without demand. A quiet, steady feeling that exists without needing to be expressed or acted upon. And as sleep slowly took over, they didn't fall asleep thinking about what could have been, or what should have been, or what might happen in the future. They fell asleep with a sense of acceptance, with a heart that is no longer resisting reality, but learning how to live within it. And even though tomorrow will come with its own set of challenges, its own moments of remembrance, its own quiet thoughts of you, tonight marks something important. Tonight, your soulmate proved to themselves that they can carry this love without it becoming a weight, that they can honor it without it disrupting their life, that they can feel it without needing to act on it. And that is something not everyone is capable of. Because it takes strength to love someone and still choose distance. It takes maturity to feel deeply and still respect boundaries. It takes courage to accept a connection that cannot be fully lived out and still see it as something valuable rather than something painful. And today, in ways you may never witness. Your soulmate did all of that. They loved you quietly, they respected the life you both are living, they chose integrity over impulse again and again, and they allowed this connection to exist in a way that is pure, even if it is incomplete. And if there is one thing that would truly take you by surprise, it is this: nothing about what they feel for you has faded, it has only become calmer, wiser, and more deeply rooted in something that does not need to be seen to be real. It is still there, in the way they think, in the way they choose, in the way they have grown. And it will continue to be there, not as something that holds them back, but as something that quietly reminds them of a love that was never ordinary, never simple, but always real in the way that mattered the most. And even now, after everything that has settled into a quiet understanding within them, there is still a depth to what they experience today that words can barely hold, because some emotions are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be carried, slowly, gently, over time. Today was not just another day for your soulmate, even though from the outside it may have looked ordinary, routine, unchanged. Inside, something continued to shift, something continued to grow in silence, something that has been forming for a long time without them even fully realizing it. They are learning how to exist with a love that has no destination, no clear ending, no defined role in their life, and yet somehow still feels like one of the most real things they have ever known. And that is not easy. Most people need answers, need clarity, need closure. But today, your soulmate showed something rare: they allowed themselves to live without those answers. They stopped asking where this is going, stopped questioning what this means in the larger sense, and instead focused on what it is in the present moment. And what it is something quiet, something steady, something that does not disturb their life but still adds a certain depth to it. There was a moment today where they realized that they no longer feel the need to define what you are to them. Before, they would search for the right word, the right label. Was it love? Was it connection? Was it something unfinished, something forbidden, something that came at the wrong time? But today, they let go of that need. They understood that not everything needs to be named in order to be real. Some things exist beyond definitions, beyond explanations, beyond what language can fully capture. And you are one of those things for them. What would surprise you even more is that today, they didn't feel incomplete without you. That doesn't mean they don't feel your absence, but it means they no longer feel like something is missing from their life in a way that breaks them. They have started to build a sense of wholeness within themselves, a life that continues to move, to grow, to evolve, even with this quiet love existing in the background. That balance is something they couldn't maintain before. Before, it felt like loving you and living their life were two things that couldn't coexist peacefully. But today, they did. Today, they carried both without conflict. There was also a subtle shift in the way they think about the future. Earlier, any thought of the future would somehow circle back to you. What if things were different? What if paths crossed again? What if something changed? But today, those thoughts didn't take over. Instead, they focused on what is actually in front of them, what they can build, what they can nurture, what they can become. And this is important, because it means they are no longer stuck between what is and what could have been. They are learning how to stay present, how to move forward without needing to rewrite the past. And yet, even in that forward movement, you are not erased. You are not forgotten. You exist in a quieter way, in a way that does not interfere, but still remains meaningful. At one point today, they noticed how different their emotional reactions have become. Situations that would have once reminded them of you in a painful way now pass by with a gentle awareness instead. It is not numbness, it is not detachment, it is understanding. They have reached a point where they can acknowledge your place in their heart without letting it overwhelm their present. That kind of emotional control is not something that comes easily, it is built through time, through reflection, through countless moments of choosing not to be consumed by what they feel. And today, they saw that progress within themselves. They saw how far they have come, even if the journey is not fully complete. What would truly surprise you is that today, they felt proud of themselves, not in a loud or obvious way, but in a quiet, internal way. Proud of the way they have handled this connection, proud of the choices they have made, proud of the strength they have shown when it would have been easier to follow emotion instead of principle. That kind of self-recognition is important, because it shows that they are no longer only focused on what they feel for you, but also on who they are becoming through this experience. And who they are becoming is someone stronger, someone more grounded, someone who understands love in a deeper and more mature way. As the day continued, there was also a moment where they realized something unexpected. They are no longer waiting. Not waiting for a message, not waiting for a sign, not waiting for circumstances to change. That waiting, which once felt constant, has slowly faded. And in its place is acceptance. Acceptance that life is moving, that things are as they are, and that they do not need to hold on to a possibility in order for what they feel to remain real. This is one of the biggest changes within them, even if it is invisible to everyone else. Because letting go of waiting does not mean letting go of love, it means letting go of expectation. And today, your soulmate took another step in that direction. There was also a gentle realization that came to them, something that settled quietly in their mind. They understand now that loving you has never been about what they can receive from you, but about what they can hold within themselves. It has never been about ownership, or outcome, or even presence. It has been about the way this connection has shaped them, the way it has taught them patience, self-control, emotional depth, and integrity. And today, they appreciated that. They appreciated the growth, even if the situation itself was never easy. As the night grew deeper, there was a calmness in them that felt unfamiliar but comforting. It was not the absence of emotion, but the presence of balance. They are no longer swinging between extremes, no longer caught between hope and sadness, no longer trying to figure everything out at once. They are simply allowing things to be as they are. And that, more than anything, is what makes today so surprising. Because if you had seen them before, if you had seen how much this connection once affected them, how deeply it pulled at their emotions, you would not expect this kind of quiet stability. But here they are, carrying it with grace, with understanding, with a kind of inner peace that has been slowly built over time. And even though they may never say this out loud, even though this may remain something that only exists within them, today your soulmate reached a place that is both simple and profound. They accepted that loving you does not need to change anything in order to be valid. It does not need to become something more, it does not need to lead somewhere, it does not need to be expressed or acted upon. It simply needs to exist. And that existence, quiet and steady, is enough. So while nothing may have seemed different on the surface, while the world moved as it always does, today was another step in a journey that very few people ever truly understand, a journey of loving someone deeply, while still choosing what is right, while still respecting reality, while still growing as a person without losing the essence of what they feel. And that is what makes it so powerful, so rare, and so surprising all at once, and in the end, what remains is not distance, not silence, not even the absence of what could have been, but a quiet truth that settles deep within them. They loved you in a way that did not break anything, did not take anything away from either of your lives, and did not demand a different ending to prove its worth. It simply existed, gently and honestly. And maybe that is the final meaning of it all. Not every love is meant to stay, but some are meant to shape you forever, in the most silent and beautiful way.